I had the hope that we could talk about the difficulties of multi-scalar cooperation, and I found that the discussion is going is drifting in this direction rather naturally. So I think if you could spend the last 10-15 minutes discussing it in a more informal way, so sorry for your slides, that could be interesting. So Glosson has talked about the difficulty of, about the need actually to build a concept of shrinkage that is understandable it is understood in the same way in various member states, which of course reminds of the issues of translation of the very term shrinkage, which is, as far as I know, in France is always a bit complicated. For instance, Mr. Sidarowski, you have talked to us about the necessity both about the necessity to change the visions of people on shrinkage, and of the difficulty to make the idea that shrinkage is accepted. I should rephrase this, and I would if we had more time. But do you think that the notion of shrinkage is conducive to a fruitful discussion with actors at all scales? Do you feel it is as easy to talk to, for instance, a mayor of a shrinking small town in Spain about shrinkage as it is to speak about it with academic actors or EU actors? Or are there very different points of view on the question and what it implies? So if the question is not clear at all, I think.
Yes, I'm trying to find it clear at least. I think this is difficult because there will be different understandings of what shrinkage is. As you say, something else is associated with shrinkage at the EU level for the EU policies, where you have some high-flying ideas and then also some, quite specific proposals like the EU Action for Smart Villages. And Peter was also very explicit on that, how the leader and the leader initiative assists in creating conditions for vibrant local places. Something else is then the political notion of shrinkage, and I agree that even though we need to accept that certain areas have been shrinking because this is the factual evidence behind it, then you might have different approaches, different stances on how then to combat, how then to address, how to tackle, how to mitigate, you name it, and then what is actually needed in the specific place in order to reverse the trends or to cope with the trends. So I would say, again, we have this, territorial differentiation in the different stances to the shrinkage problem. Well, I think what goes without saying is that we need to have a very consistent governance approach to shrinkage. And I think that throughout the whole presentation, so permeates to me is three particular elements: strong interactions between the different groups, a flexible institutional structure that responds to the challenges and organizes the work, organizes the action. And then also we need to ensure the sharing of policies and policy and strategy approaches. I think earlier in the morning we got a question from Alexia, what would be recommended for this, knowledge platform, whatever it's being called. And I think the sharing of best practices, good practices throughout the European space was something that more or less everyone would be voting for. That we need this transfer of experience, transfer of knowledge between the places on how to understand shrinkage, how to cope with it, how to achieve the certain perception of shrinkage, and then what kind of actions also in psychological dimension would be then plausible in order to realize the potential of the place. Because one thing is that to the understanding of what the area has to offer, another thing is to somehow cope with the kind of psychological effects of being labeled as a shrinking area or a shrinking population or whatever. It's demeaning in some circles, in some cultures, to be shrinking. Shrinking means something extremely negative, right? So this is also something that we need to take into account, and this behavioral aspect of shrinking, and how then to address it through the smart multi-level and territorial governance. How then to relabel ourselves as the area that, even though it's shrinking in terms of population, still has a lot of offer in terms of territorial capital.
Thank you for this intervention and your emphasis on the importance of knowledge transfer and the widespread discussion on what shrinkage implies. So we are becoming a bit pressed by time, as was probably to be expected. But maybe if Eric wants to speak first, and then we may give the final words to Peter Todd, who has been giving us material in the chat. So, Mr. Grayson.
2 points, yes, thank you. First, we all talk about the need for consistent approaches. The only country that has done this, to my knowledge, really is Italy with their inner area strategy. They have worked intensively for years. The question is, did this work at the EU level? Actually, not so well, because they have been working now for 10 years at least, and they haven't managed to really produce much in the programming period. So the Commission is a bit saying, well, this is interesting, but you haven't produced much because it takes such a lot of effort to set up the multi-level governance framework with the local alliances of municipalities, with ministries coming along, with contract building, with all of that, it's difficult to fit it into an EU programming period. So at least there are examples there, but we need to then look critically how this fit into the EU system. Second point, the EU has worked a lot with the policy objective 5, Europe closer to citizens, with integrated territorial investment, for opening up the door to these kinds of bringing the actors together. Basically, if you have from the EU Commission perspective, if you have an integrated strategy, you can get funding from basically anything, as long as the actors work together, a bit like a local action group. They can open the door to a lot of things. That's the European Commission perspective. Now, if I take the example of Sweden, the Swedish government had said, okay, that's nice, but we're not having it. The Swedish Secretary of State asked about this by the region with population decline, so the northern regions of Sweden, replied, well, we don't want ITIs in Sweden. We don't want any of it because we want free competition and we want the best projects to win within each program area. So basically they're saying, well, you shrinking areas was not capable of coming up with a better project than the urban central areas. Too bad for you. That's explicitly what is said in the reply from the Secretary of State in Sweden. So just to give you the idea that you have this filter of the national level, this has not been reviewed systematically, but we are talking about opening up the door for making consistent approaches, and the Commission has created the framework to do precisely that. But a significant proportion, I don't know how many, of the member states are basically closing the door to the possibilities that have been opened by the European Commission. So I think this is really something to be followed, because that's where the opportunities are, and the whole framework is in place at the EU level. The question in terms of multi-level governance is have the national government understood what they can do with these tools, and do they accept to go down that path?
Thank you. So the EU level may be unwieldy to some types of initiative, the EU level may not be conducive to some types of policymaking initiative. On the other hand, the national level sits a bit awkwardly with the policy initiative of the EU. Okay, thank you. And finally, Mr. Todd has a dangerous privilege of speaking the last words.
Thank you very much, and I would like to focus our attention and emphasize the importance for linking different parallel worlds in the academia, in research, in higher policy level, policy development circles. We're talking about shrinkage, depopulation, loss of services, economic restructuring. We use these kinds of terms. When I'm thinking about a local action group meeting to design one or the other element of a local development strategy, somebody in the meeting may say, oh, they just recently closed our post office, or this or that family moved away from the village, or we don't have a proper broadband service, so I cannot even start my online vegetable market, let's say, if somebody is more like innovative. So the discourses are different at different levels. And what's very important also to emphasize is that the European Union provides policy frameworks and funding resources as well for these local players, local stakeholders or regions to use properly and effectively to address the population or shrinkage, or we can call it in other terms as well. What's very important in the development on the long term of these policies, and so these policies can follow reality and can be innovative and moving forward is to find a common language. So I think there needs to be more discussion, more dialogue between policymakers, researchers, and policy implementers, let's say, from the local, regional levels as well. So these discussions are not parallel and moving in different directions, but are coming together. So I would like to emphasize the importance of knowledge exchange and linking these different worlds together. And that's also good for a reality check for both at the EU level and the local levels and regional and national levels. Thank you.